It's finally arrived. I have a Hyperlow. Hopefully the CG. So let's have a look. So we get a nice little box. Can I actually open it? Whole thing just comes out, apologies. Alright, so let's have a look and see what I've got. So I've got some little flight controller mounts. Got a nice Hyperlow sticker. LiPo pad, antenna mounts, GoPro couch, screws and standoffs, other part of the GoPro mount I think, top plate. Oh, that's nice carbon. I don't know if you can see, but it's really matte and silky. Feels beautiful. Tiniest little bit of flex in it, which if you watch my previous videos, you know that is something I now think is a definite must. It's been chamfered, but yeah, that is nice carbon. Very nice carbon. Tie wraps, the bumper, which I really like, and what have we got here? Arms, and the top or the bottom plate with its pre-installed press nuts. Damn, that's nice carbon. Right, sorry, I'm just admiring it. It really is beautiful. I've got a few other bits here. I think this is the SMA pad for your VTX. We've got some pads for the bottom. So as usual, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this together and then we'll have a look at it. As I said, the carbon looks stunning. I'm really excited about this frame. Of all the frames that I've ever flown, the Hyperlow modular, which I had and have had for about 6 months, is probably my all-time favourite frame, and it's a frame that just never ever breaks. I've still got the replacement arm I bought with it 5 or 6 months ago, and it's been crashed and bashed a million times. So I'll see you soon. Right, so here's the finished article, or finished at least in the configuration I've built it. So what you see before you is the completed Hyperlow frame minus the battery pad, which I haven't put on yet, and the antenna mount, or I should say antenna pad, which I haven't put on. So what we've got is a freestyle frame, a low profile freestyle frame, and in this configuration it's running at 15mm stack height. The quad is an X-shaped quad, and it's a good compromise between squashed X, which is pretty good at flips and rolls, and a stretched X, which is very good at fast forward flight. So what you're getting here is a really sort of good in the middle arm layout, which will allow you to do the best of both worlds really. As you can see, it's a top mounted frame. It's got an included GoPro couch, and you get these rather nifty antenna tubes, which are basically 3D printed mounts. And at the front I've built this particular one with the largest 3D camera mount, and the camera that's in this at the moment is the newly released Arrow Mini Pro. So as I said, I've built it in a 15mm configuration. It also comes with the standoffs and hardware to build it in a 10mm configuration. and you get various other bits and bobs for different cameras. So there's another camera mount which suits micro cameras, and obviously this one is the bigger one which comes with the bumpers on the front. The other one is more of a standard sort of smaller 3D printed mount. So let's kind of give you my initial impressions, and then I'll talk in detail about the frame. Initial impression, this is my favourite ever freestyle frame, and I rather suspected it would be, because as I said in the introduction, I've flown its predecessor for 5 or 6 months without issue, and I really love that frame. The whole point of running a low profile frame like this is to get the centre of gravity, the CG, hence the name, as low as possible to the prop line. And what that does is essentially give you a truer handling quad. So when you're going through corners, the quad won't swing wide, etc. There's no sort of weight up here wobbling around. And while you can tune out most of those characteristics, it's always best to tune a quad the way it wants to be tuned, and you'll have a lot easier time working to its strengths rather than trying to sort of correct its weaknesses. And my experience with the predecessor is that it's a really good flying quad. Whenever I want to do something or try a new trick, etc., it's the quad that I take out because it's the one I'm most comfortable flying. It just works really nicely for me. So what we have here, we've got 4mm chamfered arms, we've got this beautiful matte silk finish carbon, we've got a 2mm top plate and a 2mm bottom plate. As I said, the rest of it is pretty self-explanatory. It comes with pre-installed press nuts, which if I turn it over you can see, so you've got 2 on either arm, and if you see the arms themselves, they're held in place with 3 and potentially 4 bolts. So you've got 2 here, you've got 1 which attaches to this removable bumper, which is a really good idea because if you ever smash the bumper you can get another one, and this thing works really well to protect your camera from front end crashes. And again, you've got the same design on the back. In addition, when you mount your flight controller, the kit also comes with 4 long bolts for your flight controller. So essentially you're going to have another bolt here running up, and if you notice on the top plate, as per the other one, they can run straight up into the top plate if you run a 10mm stack, and that's really useful when you're building the 10mm stack version, because it means you don't have to use nylon nuts, etc. on your stack. You can basically just attach everything in and use the soft mount itself as the end point of your stack, if that makes sense. So it saves you 2 or 3mm of build space, which is a really clever idea. The real interesting points of this frame are the inside and its kind of party trick. Hyperlow frames have influenced a lot of frames out there. They were really the first people, or I should say the first person, to sort of really sort of go for this low profile type frame. And this shares its party trick with the unibody version of the modular frame. So this is it in its top mounted battery configuration with, as I said, 15mm standoffs. You can build it lower. All you need to do to convert it into basically a mid mount, so I suppose similar to Tommy's Umagard frame, is turn it over, remove the bumper at the front, put it on the bottom, and obviously change over the 3D printed parts and the camera mount. And what you have then is a mid mount frame, which is really clever. So you're getting the kind of best of both worlds in one frame. It's a really nifty idea, and of course you would just then put your battery pad on the top as opposed to here, like so. So it's going to be really easy to swap and change and tinker, because all your components inside, obviously by the motors, will remain the same. You can change everything in Betaflight, so it's not going to be a huge job just to desolder your motors and flip them over and turn your camera over to really have a completely different quad to fly. And I really like that idea. As somebody who kind of likes to mess and mooch around with quads, I think it's a fantastic idea. The other thing which I really like is the inside, and I'll show you that now. I'll just remove the top plate. Right, so this is it with the top plate removed, and this is where Richard's experience of these low ride frames or mid-mount frames comes in. As you can see, we've got 2 fiberglass little plates, and you get 4 in the kit should you want to put 2 on the top of your stack as well. And what this allows you to do is basically sit your flight control in the middle, your receiver up front, and obviously your VTX at the back. And if you've got a VTX like the AKK FX2 or the Matek VTX, it's really easy to stack mount your VTX. What these plates also do is, if you run in the alternative mode, so the mid-mount mode, these little plates allow you to thread your battery strap through the top, well, what would be the top, without disturbing anything inside. So it's a really nice idea, and it's going to be really easy just to zip tie or 3M foam tape your components onto these little pads, and obviously you could run one in the middle if you wanted to do so as well. So I really like the idea of this. It means you can shove all your wiring underneath if you run it in this configuration, so all your wiring's out the way, leaving this central area really just for your components, because the way that the arms mount obviously leaves further space underneath. And while we're talking about the arms themselves, as I said, if you look, they swing out and down to here. So they're mounted via the standoff here, and then you've got the 2 press nuts holding there, and then you would have your flight controller bolt stack coming out of this one. And what this design is doing is really spreading force all the way across. And if you notice, there is absolutely zero play in this frame, and I suspect even when you've crashed it and bashed it, there won't be, because every time you hit something, it's not just taking the force here, it's spreading the force to the meat of this bottom plate. And if you compare that to something like, oh, didn't want to say this, but I've said it anyway. If you compare that to something like the Armaton Rooster, which has come out, the thing that I hate about that frame is the way that the separate arms are mounted on those 2 little bolts, and there's already issues with flapping arms, even though they've redesigned or should I say fixed the bolts. And longer term, that movement is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, whereas with this frame, far less likely to happen, simply because the distribution of force is over a far greater area. The other thing that I really like the idea of is, because you've got these kind of almost 3 mounting points, you could kind of play and do really interesting things. So if I get, this is the Airbot F4V5, I think it is, which they sent me to review, and I haven't reviewed yet, simply because I need to check something out first. But if you imagine there's your flight controller, and then you want your 4-in-1 ESC, and this is the Typhoon 32 V2. Because this flight controller is got all these connectors on, you'd never be able to mount this in a 10mm stack. You could easily do it on the 15mm, and I've tried that. But what you could potentially do is mount your ESC here and your flight controller potentially, I haven't played around with this, here, or vice versa. So it kind of frees up a lot of options. You could even kind of run it towards the front like that, although I wouldn't recommend you do that. But there are lots of different ways you can play around with this configuration to suit yourself. What I could also do is use the Knox 2.17, and even though this has got 20 by 20 mount holes, because of these fiberglass plates and the fact that this is already soft mounted, could easily just sit this in here like that, just on a couple of spacers. So there's tons of ways you can play around with the inside of this frame, and I really like it. I just think it's a really nifty idea. So if I compare it to my modular, which is here, I love this frame, and as I said, nothing has ever failed on it. The only thing that you ever have to replace, if I turn it over, are the nylock nuts, which are about £2 for a bag of 20. And as you can see, as they fail, I'm basically putting them on the top of the arms, hence the reason why some are on the bottom and some are on the top. But I love this frame. It had, for me, a couple of drawbacks, or a couple of things that I didn't think were as good as they could be. The first was that the top plate is absolutely fine for a 1300 battery. At a squeeze, you could potentially get a very small 1500 mAh battery on it, but no more than that. I've flown it with the battery literally hanging off the end on some of the graphene batteries, the 1500s, and I always felt it was just a little bit tight. I always wished there was another few millimeters or a centimeter there. The other thing is, I've never had any prop strikes on my battery ever on this particular frame, because once you strap it up nice and tight with the two straps, the battery simply doesn't move. However, when you're strapping your battery in, you need to make sure you strap it in to the center, because as you can see, the actual prop clearance is relatively small. So you just need to pay a little bit of attention when you're attaching your battery, and if you do, you're absolutely fine. However, I always kind of wished that there was, again, another kind of millimeter or more clearance. At the front, it doesn't make any difference. I'm happy for it to be as close as it needs to be. So it's a fantastic quad. I just wish that little bit was bigger. If we compare it to the new frame, I've attached a motor to the back just to demonstrate this next part. First off, you'll see that the way this back plate or top plate flares out here is basically bang on where it needs to be. You've got a few millimeters of clearance, and that's plenty. If I then put on my GoPro session and line it up to where it would actually be, and then attach my battery, or pretend to attach it, you'll see immediately I've got a lot more space at the back. And what you'll also see is that while we've got a mid mount or a top mount in this configuration frame, the rear props are miles away from this battery. It would have to swing miles out, and even then there's not really any chance. If you think that your battery straps are here, there's just no chance of these rear props hitting your battery. And you've got a choice of three mounting points here, three battery strap points here. So it's just not going to happen. And I love the fact that he's kind of listened to his customers, or maybe from his own thoughts, and just added this little bit of flair here, which sorts that out. And again, if you look at it on the other side, it's the same story if you run it in its mid configuration. Although you haven't got that kind of butt there, your props are going to be up here, and they're going to be miles away from your battery. So there's just no chance, even though you're getting the best of all worlds, and you've got obviously a mid-mount or a really low profile frame, he's taken away that danger of prop strikes. I should say props hitting your battery. And for me, this makes it the perfect frame. This frame in this configuration weighs 120 grams. If you compare it to the other frames that are out there, similar beefy frames that aren't going to break in 2 minutes, it's bang on the weight that it needs to be a really good freestyle frame. This has got so many design features that were on the originals, the fact that this bumper stands proud allows the camera to sit lower. So when you're doing rolls, you don't get that sort of weird, clunky sort of ellipse when you're rolling round like you did on the original Chameleon, because the camera sat too high. So yeah, I've kind of waffled on quite a bit, but my honest opinion is right now this is the best freestyle frame on the market, full stop, bar none. There is nothing to my knowledge, and I tend to sort of look at everything that comes out that is better than this. It's simple where it needs to be, it's clever, and it's been designed by somebody who knows about quads. It's even got a little tail, if I can find an antenna, to protect your SMA connector, and you even get a little pad that it can sit on and keep it cozy. It's just, in my opinion, it's the perfect frame. It's two frames in one. It's built to last. And I know I sound like a teenage boy with his first girlfriend, but I think it's an absolutely stonking frame. I'm not affiliated with Richard in any way. I don't care whether you buy it. I don't get any kudos or anything from you buying this. I just think, to my mind, it's the best freestyle frame I've ever seen. The true test of any frame will be flying it, and that's when you get to know if there are any annoyances. And if you look at my reviews, quite often when I like a frame, the Thug was a good recent example. Go and check out the description. You'll see that I've added additional notes in of things that I found I didn't like, and if that's the case for this guy, I'll add those notes in as well. But given it's an evolution of a frame that I already love, and I already know what that frame's downsides were, I don't really see I'm going to have too many issues. So right now, I think I'm going to build mine in this configuration, and that's only because it will allow me to run this guy, which I need to test, and this guy, which I need to test, unless I do something really quirky inside. Both of these are rated for 6S, and what I'd like to do at some point is try 5S on a freestyle setup. So I may use the Airbots Mr. Copper motors on this. Cheers guys. I'll no doubt do a build video on this at some point, probably just a build overview, and obviously you'll see it flying in the not too distant future as well. But yeah, it's an absolute peach of a frame. Cheers, bye bye.